Welcome back to Superhero Explained. Today we are diving into Superman Spider-Man 2026 number 1, a brand new DC Marvel crossover that starts like a reporter's story and then escalates fast into a full-blown catastrophe involving Doctor Octopus, Brainiac, Kryptonite, and a citywide neural attack. And what really makes this one fun is that it doesn't just give you the spectacle of Superman and Spider-Man sharing pages. It actually gives them a strong dynamic as both journalists and heroes. So the issue opens in Doctor Octopus's lab in New York, and Otto is already in a terrible mood. He's asking an AI assistant who the world sees as the top expert in cyber robotics, then who the top authority on radiation is, and every answer it gives him makes him angrier because it keeps naming other scientists instead of him. And that's the point of the page. Otto can handle being feared. He can handle people calling him a criminal. What he cannot handle is the idea that the world does not properly appreciate his genius. So right away, the story tells you that this whole thing is going to be driven by ego. Then, out of nowhere, a voice interrupts him and basically says he can start fixing that today if he stops drowning in self-pity. Suddenly, Otto's tentacles start moving on their own, assembling something without his command, and now he's completely thrown off. The voice keeps talking, promising him a place in galactic history if he cooperates. That is exactly the kind of bait Otto would respond to. He demands answers, asks who is controlling his arms, and when the assembled face finally speaks, it gives him the name, Brainiac. So in one page, this stops being just another Doc Ock tantrum and becomes a much bigger crossover threat. Then we cut to Metropolis, where Clark Kent and Peter Parker are arriving at Star Labs as reporters. And this is where the issue gets charming immediately. Peter is joking about how broke he is, thanking Clark for the lift, taking a mile a minute, trying to make the most out of this lead. Clark is much calmer, much more understated, but you can already tell he's alert. Peter is in full awkward, funny, freelance survival mode. Clark is in quite professional mode, and the chemistry works almost instantly. Inside the lab, Dr. Clyburn explains that someone with inhuman strength stole radioactive material and a lot of related tech. Peter starts examining the breaking point, while Clark presses her for what she's not saying publicly. That's when we get the real reveal. The tech involved fast neutrons, and Peter immediately understands the science angle. But the bigger twist is that this wasn't just ordinary radioactive research. Star Labs was using Kryptonite. That lands hard for Clark, and Peter notices it right away. Up until now, this was just a strange theft. Now, it's very clearly a Superman-level problem. Once they're outside, Peter confirms what the damage already suggested. The marks match Doctor Octopus's tentacles. So now they know Otto is the thief, and Otto has Kryptonite. Clark immediately starts changing and says he has to find him, and Peter shuts that down fast. He's not letting Superman run off alone, so both of them suit up in the alley, but Clark still finishes first and takes off before Peter is even fully ready. Peter has to scramble after him, which is a nice little reminder of the difference in scale between them, even though Peter is absolutely determined to keep up. Then we get the big crossover visual, Superman flying over Metropolis with Spider-Man swinging just beside him. And Peter instantly starts talking trash in the most Peter Parker way possible, joking that Superman probably isn't this impatient with Batman. That line does a lot. It keeps the tone lively, it immediately defines Peter's role in the duo, and it shows that he's not going to be intimidated into silence just because he's next to Superman. Back with the villains, Brainiac finally explains what this whole plan actually is. He says he was infected with a mind virus, and now he wants Otto's help dumping that corrupted data into the minds of Earth's population. To Brainiac, humanity is basically just disposable storage space. Otto, meanwhile, has been fascinated by the Kryptonite itself. He explains that in his hands, it's more than just a weapon. Combined with Brainiac's ship as a relay, it can be used to build a system that transmits directly into millions of human brains. So Brainiac gets a cure, Otto gets the universal recognition he's been craving, and the machine powers up. That's the villain alliance in one sentence. Cold machine logic meets wounded human ego. Back in Metropolis, the heroes are still searching when Superman suddenly doubles over in pain and starts falling out of the air. Spider-Man reacts instantly, catches him, and tries to keep things light. But Clark makes it clear this is serious. He says the Kryptonite is in the air, mixed with something else. Then both of them realize it at the same time. Fast neutrons. Otto is broadcasting the Kryptonite. And then Clark hears accidents breaking out all over the city and says the really important line here. This isn't about him. Superman is not the real target. He's just the first one suffering badly enough to notice. Now the city starts breaking down. Cars are crashing. People are screaming. And some of them are suddenly speaking in binary, which is the first really disturbing sign that this is more than radiation poisoning or panic. Something is being forced into their minds. And this is where the teamwork kicks in cleanly. Peter calls the bystanders. Clark takes the truck. No debate, no confusion. They just instantly divide the rescue work and start saving people. That's one of the things this issue does well. It doesn't spend forever convincing you these two can work together. It just shows you. As the crisis spreads, Superman points out the victims aren't doing anything except suffering. They're not acting with purpose. They're overwhelmed. Peter starts trying to reason it through, and for a second, even he begins slipping into binary before Clark pulls him back and tells him to focus. Then Peter finally names what's happening: a data override. Otto is using the Kryptonite signal to dump information straight into human brains. Clark scans the city and sees the corruption spreading everywhere, not just in speech, but even in ordinary thought. One person is literally typing binary instead of words. That's the creepy escalation on this page. The city isn't just in danger physically. Cognition itself is being overwritten. The emergencies keep multiplying. Superman saves people from an oncoming train. Spider-Man deals with the bomb. The victims around them are still screaming in binary. And now both heroes are starting to feel the toll. Clark admits the longer he stays inside this atmospheric kryptonite exposure, the weaker he gets. Peter says he's having trouble focusing as well. So they finally narrow the mission. They need to find the kryptonite source now, before both of them lose too much ground. But instead of the source, Clark spots a new emergency. A burning apartment building with trapped civilians inside and compromised firefighters on the ground. Peter immediately points out the problem. Superman is so weakened right now that even the fire is a real danger to him. Clark goes in anyways. So Peter adapts. He uses his webbing as a kind of makeshift heat shield, and Superman charges into the building wrapped in it. That's a great little crossover specific teamwork bit. Clark brings the power, Peter brings the improvisation. Inside the collapsing building, Superman saves Peter from a falling beam, and Peter still has enough energy to crack a joke about Superman's breath smelling like sandalwood. They finish the rescue, but then the rescued victims start screaming in binary again, and this time they suddenly stop. Superman checks them and realizes they are dead. That's the brutal turn. This attack is not just causing mental interference, it's fatal. Peter starts to realize this doesn't even fully feel like Doctor Octopus's style. Clark spots the broadcast source a few blocks away, and the heroes split. Spider-Man goes after the machine and Otto, Superman goes after Otto's ally. Superman flies straight into what he thinks is Brainiac's ship, crashes in and calls Brainiac out. But instead of Brainiac, he finds Doctor Octopus waiting for him, and now Otto's tentacles are infused with Kryptonite. That is a nasty twist, because it means Otto has not just stolen Superman's weakness, he has built it directly into his own signature weapons. And Clark realizes immediately he did not surprise anybody. He walked into a trap. Meanwhile, Spider-Man reaches the lab expecting Otto and instead comes face to face with Brainiac. Brainiac openly admits what he is doing. He is cleansing himself of a virus, and if human brains can't safely contain the corrupted data, that's not his concern. Peter gives the obvious moral response. These are human beings, not storage containers. And instead of wasting time arguing, he goes straight for the machine. That's the right instinct, but Brainiac is ready and knocks him away before he can shut it down. Up on the ship, Otto hammers Superman with those kryptonite tentacles and says he's prepared for this. He wanted even better kryptonite, but this version should still be enough to finish Clark. And Superman does something smart here. He doesn't just fight back physically. He tries to reach Otto emotionally. He reminds him that before the accident, he was respected. Clark Kent himself once wrote about him as a brilliant scientist. And that actually rattles Otto. For a guy obsessed with being remembered, hearing that Superman, or really Clark, remembers the man he used to be hits him hard. At the same time, Brainiac keeps pressing Spider-Man in the lab, treating the whole fight like a calculation problem. Peter's answer to that is pure Spider-Man instinct and refusal. Then Spider-Man actually gets a little momentum and lands a shot on Brainiac, joking that spider sense beats math. But Brainiac changes tactics immediately. Instead of fighting Peter directly, he calculates the structural weak points of the building and brings the whole thing down. That's such a Brainiac move. He doesn't care about fair combat. He just wants efficiency. Spider-Man gets buried under the rubble, and Brainiac uploads his consciousness away to another outpost, leaving his body behind like an empty shell. So now Peter is trapped, and Brainiac may have already escaped. Back on the ship, Superman finally manages to knock Doctor Octopus out. But the second that happens, the ship starts powering down. Clark immediately understands the danger. Brainiac has changed the ship's trajectory, and now the whole mothership is falling straight towards Metropolis. He contacts Spider-Man and tells him the machine has to be shut off now. Peter answers from under the rubble, injured. Masks torn, still trapped. Then it gets worse. When Peter tries to fire web, he gets nothing. He's out of web fluid. So now both heroes are basically at the edge. Superman is too weak to stop the falling ship alone, and Spider-Man is buried with no easy way out. This page is all about sheer willpower. Superman is up there trying to stop a falling alien ship from crushing the city, and while doing it, he tells Peter, "You can do this." Down below, Peter is having that classic Spider-Man moment where he has to force himself up through pain and panic under impossible weight. Then Clark adds a line that really carries the page, "I believe in you." And that becomes the emotional core here. These two are separated, but they're basically holding each other up through trust. Now, the comic mirrors them perfectly. Superman is screaming with effort above the city. Spider-Man is screaming with effort under the rubble. And Peter finally gets free, reaches the lever and throws it back into place, deactivating the machine. That's the turn. The signal is off. The city finally has a chance. With the broadcast shut down, Superman gets just enough of his strength back to stop the falling mothership above Metropolis. And once he does, he says over the comms, "We did it, partner." That line works, because by this point, they really have earned that. Down below, Peter checks the result in the most Peter Parker way possible. No boom, and once Clark confirms, no boom. Peter smiles and passes out. Then we get the cooldown at the Daily Planet. Peter and Clark hand over photos of Doctor Octopus being arrested, and Perry White is impressed enough to put Peter on the front page and get him paid. Afterwards, Clark asks Peter a pretty fair question. Why spend years selling Spider-Man photos to J. Jonah Jameson, knowing those pictures were being used to fuel anti-Spider-Man coverage? And Peter's answer is perfect. Jameson had no idea he was basically paying for Spider-Man to go to college. That's a very Peter Parker way of surviving a bad system. Make it work for you anyway. The final page ends exactly where it should, with warmth. Peter points out that it must be nice to work in a city that actually loves Superman. Clark says that does help. Then Clark offers Peter a ride, and Peter jokes that Aunt May has a crush on him. Clark tells him not to tell Lois, and the two of them head off together through the sky. And that's the note the issue lands on. Not just a crossover spectacle, but the sense that after all this chaos, Superman and Spider-Man genuinely liked each other. That's why the book works. It gives you the Kryptonite, the Brainiac plot, the giant falling ship, but the thing you actually remember is that Clark and Peter felt right together. And that's it. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and comment your favorite moment down below. I'll see you next time on Superhero Explained.